Good afternoon and welcome to the Rotary Club of Madison. I'm George Hidalgo, Club President, and thank you for joining us. So we opened today's meeting with some sad news of the death of member Lori Kai, who passed away on October 17th at the age of 75. She was a member of our club for nearly 33 years and served as Executive Director of Parking at the UW-Madison for a number of years. Within Rotary, Lori served on our club board of directors, as well as our Madison Rotary Foundation Board of Trustees, and she previously chaired our scholarship committee. She and her husband, Arlen, who is a member of the Oregon Rotary Club, established a fund within our Madison Rotary Foundation in 2014 to provide grants to our Rotary scholars. Now, our club has made a donation of $100 to the Madison Rotary Foundation to establish a Lori Kai Memorial Fund. Anyone wishing to make a gift to this fund or to the Kai Grant Fund held within our Madison Rotary Foundation may send their donation to the Rotary office. Let's pause for a moment of silence in memory of our friend and fellow Rotarian, Lori Kai. My opening message today is about Rotarians helping Rotarians. Here we are once again in the conference room of Pearson Engineering, and Brian Baskin, owner of the company, and Jason Barron are volunteering several hours a week to keep our club connected during the pandemic. This is outstanding service above self, and we sincerely thank them. Another area where we could use a few volunteers is with our music. Twice a month, our music committee selects a song, and Jeff and Angela's son Nick has assisted with some terrific video to go along with the songs to make them more fun while we are online. And we are now seeking a few members of our club to help with the production of a few music videos. If you or you have someone in your staff or on your staff who will be willing to volunteer to work for our music committee to create a music video in the coming months, please contact our Rotary office. So let's see if we can have some more creative members who can help us while we are meeting virtually. So again, Rotarians helping Rotarians. Now let's open our meeting today by reciting the 4-way plus test of the things we say or do. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? And as you know, I've added a 5th item for this year. Will it be fun for all concerned? And I hope we have a little fun today and all our meetings while we connect, grow, and serve together. On to our opening music. Let's direct attention to Elaine Mishler, who played America the Beautiful on the piano. So past President Ellsworth Brown has an update on this year's community grant campaign. Ellsworth?
Thank you, George, and good afternoon, fellow Rotarians. Actually, George, it seems strange to thank you for introducing me since you haven't yet. I'm actually recording this on Friday the 16th, just 2 days after our campaign for the Community Grants Program launched. And already we have noticed an uptick in giving and know that 37 of you have contributed a total of just $20 short of $15,000 to the goal of $110,000. So thank you very much for that participation. And I will look forward to keeping you up to speed on the progress we make each week, showing you different videos among the 18 that we have gathered from different receiving organizations. But I want to begin and close my remarks by giving you a chance to see the video prepared by Second Harvest Food Bank of Southern Wisconsin, which is run by our own Michelle Orgay, and who is president and CEO of the Second Harvest Food Bank, which is an exemplar in this community. And it will give you a sense of what it means for them to be an anchor and what it means by extension for us to be part of that in this time of need. So without further ado, but with the thought that I will see you again next week, Michelle Orgay and Second Harvest Food Bank.
Before the pandemic, more than 100,000 people in southwestern Wisconsin were already struggling to make ends meet. They were working jobs that were vulnerable to furloughs and layoffs. Now, many of them have lost those jobs or had wages reduced. For families living paycheck to paycheck, COVID-19 can disrupt school, work, or health and mean the difference between stability and hunger. Many of these families are visiting partner agencies and our mobile pantries for the first time in their lives. They need our help, and we're here for them. We face many new challenges. Donations of food are down just when we need them the most, which means we have to purchase more food to keep up with the need. We brought on more than a dozen new temporary employees to make up for the work that the volunteers used to do. All of this is vital, and it comes at an increased cost that goes beyond our regular budget. From March 15th to August 15th, we distributed more than 350,000 boxes of food. This is enough food for nearly 7 million meals, and 65% more food than we distributed in the same time period last year. We've added 80 mobile pantries in our 16-county service area. This includes at schools and in neighborhoods that serve people in need. Feeding America has predicted, and we're seeing, a 61% increase in the number of food insecure people in southwestern Wisconsin. Many people are visiting our mobile pantries and our partner agencies for the first time in their lives. For example, in June, we served 1,000 families in 5 hours with 100,000 pounds of food. I was there, and while it was challenging to see how many people were in need, it was also heartwarming to see all of them leaving with smiles on their faces and big bags of locally grown produce, dairy, and staple items to feed their families. Thank you for your help with that. It's because of you that we were able to do that.
So it's election season in our club, so we're going to announce our directors and nominees until our election on November 11th. We have 12 members who serve 2-year staggered terms on our club board of directors, with 6 members elected annually. The immediate past president also serves a 1-year term. So our current board members are, as you see on the screen, Joyce Bromley, Mark Clare, Sarah Detienne, Stephen Elke, Paul Hoffman, Teresa Holmes, Andrew Kaminsky, Haley Salsa Miller, Mark Moody, Maddie O'Brien, Lee Richardson, Lynn Sexton, and Cheryl Woodkey. So let's give them a round of applause. So as I mentioned, our board has 2-year staggered terms. So Joyce, Sarah, Paul, Teresa, Andrea, Haley, and Lynn will be going off the board on June 30th. We now begin the process to elect 6 new board members to replace those outgoing board members. The nominating committee reviewed over 50 names, and I'm pleased to introduce 12 nominees. The following members have agreed to place their name in nomination By the way, we asked our nominees for family or fun photo to add to their slide when I announced them today, so you'll see several additions to make it fun. So Deb Archer, Brian Baskin, Herman Bauman, Sandy Geller, Jenny Jeffries, Anita Mohammed, Charles McLymans, Valerie Rank, Jen Savino, Scott Strong, Martha Sullivan, Rob Vandenberg. So on November 11th, the membership will select 6 of these leaders to join the board for a 2-year term beginning next July 1st. So the 12 nominees represent the future leaders of our club, and any combination of these 6 will serve our club well for the next 2 years. Because of the pandemic, our board adopted an emergency resolution to allow for our election to be held electronically. We'll be sending an email to all members on November 11th, and members will need to click on the link and complete the ballot by noon the next day. We'll also send the ballot out to any member without an email address 10 days before the election, so they have sufficient time to get the ballot back to us. Now, our club bylaws also provide for the possibility of additional nominations. Any 20 voting members may nominate additional candidates. Additional nominations must be submitted in writing and filed with Pat Jenkins in the Rotary office by Wednesday, October 28th. So thanks again to the 12 nominees who have agreed to place their names in nomination this year. A few reminders about community service opportunities. Remember, it is Socktober. So be sure to pick up some socks on your next trip to get supplies and drop off the socks at Porch Light. Or, like I did, go through your sock drawer. The socks will be appreciated by those in need during the upcoming winter months. One easier way to donate socks is to go to Amazon or another website online and order socks to be delivered to Porch Light. The address is listed in our Friday newsletter. Our Community Projects Committee is also holding a drop-in event at Jenna's Lounge on Main Street in downtown Madison tonight from 4 to 6 p.m. so you can say hello to Rotarians and drop off your socks. Our Community Projects has also arranged for 2 groups of volunteers to help assemble Thanksgiving baskets at the Goodman Community Center. There are details showing on the screen and are also listed in our Friday newsletter. So, next announcement is Rob Stroud shares our Member Development Committee and will make an introduction. Rob?
Thank you, George. Hello, everybody. I'm chairing the Membership Development Committee this year, and we work to build and sustain membership in our club. The committee created an award 6 years ago to recognize a member who is sponsoring new members into our club, since this is the key to maintaining our club size. The award is named after Mitch Javid. And Mitch has the distinguished honor of being the record holder for our club. He has sponsored the highest number of new members in our club. Currently, that number is 56 new members. And he co-sponsored another 10. This distinguished and very busy member, who was chairman of the UW Department of Neurosurgery, says, quote, "I love Rotary. It is very dear to me. I believe in it, and so I want to share it with other good people." Mitch received the first award in 2014. Susan Schmitz has won it 3 years in a row, but this year, the new recipient this year is Melanie Ramey. Melanie has served as the primary sponsor to 12 new members, 7 of those new members since July of 2017. The most recent 7 are Ben Blagoji, Deborah Cronmiller, Lori DePreet Brown, Ryan Klostenmeyer, Maggie Porter Kratz, Walt Stewart, and Carol Troon. Melanie is a communications coach, and she was previously CEO of Hope of Wisconsin for 15 years. She served as president of our club from 1998 to 1999. And as you heard last week, she was the president who created the birthday gifts, which has generated over $500,000 for our club's foundation since it was started 23 years ago. Melanie is also active in our Rotary Youth Exchange, UW Rotaract, and Welcoming Committees, and she is a Rotary Scholar Mentor. Let's congratulate Melanie on receiving this year's Mitch Javid Award. One closing comment. We encourage each of you to think about who might be a good addition to our Rotary Club. Maybe it's a coworker, a friend, a neighbor. The process is easy. Invite that potential member to one of our virtual Wednesday meetings or send them a link to our club's YouTube channel where they can watch our recent past Rotary meetings. To propose a new member, complete the membership proposal form that is available on our website or contact the Rotary office. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact me or the Rotary office. Thank you. And thank you, Melanie.
So on to birthdays. We have birthdays to celebrate with a little bit of humor or wisdom that complements Rotary's mission. We also encourage members to make it an age-appropriate gift to the Madison Rotary Foundation, rounded up to $100 to our Club Synergy Scholarship Fund. October 18th, Paul Riemann, past president. October 18th, Joe Sensenbrenner. October 19th, Paul Flair. October 20th, George Gilamas. October the 21st, which is today, and there's 3 people. We got Marcy Henderson, Laura Peck, and Ernie Stettenfeld, who says, "Many thanks to my fellow Rotarians for their generous support of our community's neighborhoods in need." So for those who don't know, he is in charge of Society of St. Vincent de Paul. So obviously, pretty busy time. October 21st is Charles Tubbs, and then October 22nd, Joan Ziegler. So thanks to our celebrants for the contribution to the Madison Rotary Foundation. Please join me in wishing them a happy birthday. Casey Okers will play Happy Birthday on the flute. So thank you very much, Casey. And now on to members in the news. My featured member in the news this week is Ellen Carlson. Ellen joined our Rotary Club in 2018 and is active in our marketing and communications and welcoming committees. She is executive director of Middletown Outreach Ministry, an organization that is helping to prevent homelessness and ending hunger for families in our area. Ellen began her tenure with Middletown Outreach Ministry in 2002, and she has a long history of giving back to the community. Upon graduation from UW-Madison, she joined AmeriCorps Vista, where she worked with the Schools of Hope Literacy Project in the Madison area. Last week, Ellen was quoted in an article about Middleton Outreach Ministries half-pint resale. This is the Madison area's largest children's consignment sale, which she helped start 12 years ago. And the article shared details on how they are moving the annual fall sale online due to the pandemic. And that was in the Washington State Journal last Thursday. So again, a great example of one of our Rotarians giving back to the community. So that's outstanding. Other members in the news that will appear in the newsletter, in case you want to highlight any: Kaleem Kerr was quoted in an article about Wind City Schools moved to the new South Side Space, Capital Times 1014. Londa Dewey was featured in an article about QTI Group and how they're adjusting changes in their business during the pandemic. That's Bravo Magazine, September-October 2020. And Cheryl Wiki says that national studies have pointed to growing mental health concerns among young people during the pandemic. So that's WSJ on 1018. And also, congratulations to Mallory Hepner, her husband Jeremiah, on the birth of their daughter, family of her big brother Charlie. All are happy and healthy. So we want members to see who our current board members are for this year. So we are continuing to ask one of our board members to introduce a speaker each month. This month, board member Stephen Elke will introduce our speaker. Stephen joined our club in 2013, and he's a Dane County Circuit Judge. Stephen is in his first of a 2-year term on our club board. He will now introduce our speaker. So should I say, here comes the judge? Or
Hello, everyone. Today's speaker is Eileen Harrington, who retired from the Senior Executive Service of the United States government at the end of 2012 after a distinguished 28-year career protecting American consumers in 2 different federal agencies. She was previously Executive Director of the Federal Trade Commission and served as Chief Operating Officer of the U.S. Small Business Administration. In 1997, President Clinton gave Ms. Harrington the title of Distinguished Executive in the Senior Executive Service for, quote, sustained extraordinary accomplishments, end quote, in organizing and leading intra-agency enforcement, education, and regulatory efforts to halt consumer fraud. This is the highest distinction that can be conferred on a member of the career civil service. In 2004, she was awarded a Service to America Medal for her work creating the National Do Not Call Law and Registry. Ms. Harrington served as chair of the City of Madison's Taskforce on Government Structure. The task force met for nearly 2 years, held more than 90 meetings around the city, and a year ago issued a report calling for significant change and better oversight. She will highlight several recommendations and share her thinking about how our city government can and should be restructured. If you have questions for her, please use the chat function on YouTube during her presentation, and President George will select questions from the chat. Let's now welcome Eileen Harrington to our podium and thank her for coming.
Thank you so much, Judge Elke, for that introduction, and thank you, Rotarian Mike May, former city attorney and friend and colleague, for arranging this opportunity for me to report to you today about the work of the Task Force on Government Structure. So let's just ask the basic question here. Why are we talking about the structure of Madison's municipal government? Well, our decisions about how we organize our governance structures, how we govern ourselves, carry implicit decisions about who gets to participate in the work of government. So structure really matters and process matters, because by making these structural and process decisions, we are including people, and unfortunately, as we found to be the case here, sometimes we're excluding people. I hope that you'll listen today with an open mind. Perhaps you'll learn something that will cause you to see that here in Madison, we hold a somewhat romanticized notion that we are a city governed by citizen volunteers, but that notion is part myth, and it's perpetuated by people who have benefited most from the status quo, or who are themselves, like me, rich in time or money in ways that allow them the luxury of being a citizen volunteer in Madison. In fact, what our task force found is that we have in Madison a government that's structured in a way that excludes people who are neither time nor money rich from serving on our common council or on the 102 plus boards, commissions, and committees that develop public policy for our city. Our structure prevents most alders from meaningful engagement with the residents who live in their districts because they simply don't have enough time to engage. It's a system that many people, those with full-time jobs and long commutes and family responsibilities, those who are barely making it and have to move every year or two when rent goes up, those who don't own cars, those who can't attend hours-long meetings downtown at night, those who don't understand Robert's rules, or who don't have 3 or 4 hours to sit at a city meeting waiting for their 3-minute opportunity to speak. These residents, who probably make up a sizable majority of our city's residents, simply cannot afford to participate in the institutions of government in our city, whether simply as residents wishing to be heard, as members of one of our city's really ridiculous number of boards, commissions, or committees, or as members of the Common Council. You know, I think, and especially I know you think this as Rotarians, that the purpose of our local government is to serve the common good and strengthen our community by providing the services and meeting needs of our residents that are by law or ethos what we regard as our collective civic responsibility. While our Madison municipal government serves this purpose to some extent, for many, it also, by virtue of its structures and processes, picks winners and losers. The city makes important decisions about housing and public transportation and access to services, but many of the people who are most affected by these decisions are shut out because the structure and process of our municipal government shuts them out. We have arcane rules, we underuse technology, and our city government, unbelievably to me, has no central communications department or office or effective means of communicating with all of its residents. A large part of our governance structure plows on with little accountability or oversight, and for most residents, it's far removed from neighborhoods or engagement with residents. Now, before going into a summary of our report, I want to address a recent editorial just on Sunday from the Wisconsin State Journal editorial board opposing a couple of our task force recommendations that the council be reduced by half and paid a full-time salary. Their editorial is grounded in part on an argument that this would cost too much money. I want to thank the editorial board, by the way. I had no idea they were doing this, for putting this editorial in the Sunday paper as a teaser almost for me being here with you today. Thank you, State Journal editorial board. My question to the State Journal editorial board and others who make the same argument that they've made, that it would simply cost too much money to have a full-time council. My questions are, do you have any idea what the status quo costs, both in terms of taxpayer dollars and the amount of city staff time spent supporting the status quo? Do you understand what the cost of maintaining a government structure that excludes large numbers of our residents from participation is? Do you honestly think our city can thrive if we exclude so many of our people from meaningful engagement in and with our government? We are at a time in our city, in our state, and in our nation when we need all hands on deck. We have a lot of problems. How can we possibly sustain a government structure that excludes so many of the very people who we need to be engaged to make our city thrive? The Common Council directed our task force to investigate the structure of the city's government through an equity lens. Subcommittees of our task force and the task force itself as a whole met over 90 times in the course of nearly 2 years. Now, while the Wisconsin State Journal editorial board rather snarkily criticized us for holding too many meetings, we believed that it was extremely important to meet with and listen to as many of Madison's residents as possible to hear their thoughts about aspects of our government structure and also to hear their aspirations for city government. And frankly, the State Journal's criticism that we met too many times represents a voice of Madison's privileged class, and a smug voice at that, I would say. The voice of those who benefit from the current structure and believe that Madison has it right in all ways, most especially when it comes to how we govern ourselves. Had those voices been the majority on our task force, I think here's how it would have worked. We would have met 3, maybe 4 times. We would have said, well, it's all good. We've got, a government that's supported by an army of citizen volunteers. We would have issued our report saying that, and that would have been it. Instead, our task force of 7 residents and 4 alders took this work really seriously, and many, including me, were surprised by what we learned. I started out holding the view that the Wisconsin State Journal editorial board holds. That was my starting point. I would ask the State Journal editorial board, made up of 4 people who, frankly, I've never met or talked to. I don't know who they met with in coming up with this position of theirs. Maybe they talked to a bunch of old white guys who used to be on the city council or used to be mayor and think it's all good. I wonder if they understand that the concerns that the task force was created to address were the very concerns that caused us to take a fresh look at how Madison's government is structured. Now, the State Journal superficially concluded that it's all good here because people of color, who represent only 20% of the population, hold 40% of the seats on our 20-member council. Really? That kind of superficial analysis tells you it's all good? Did the State Journal ask the task force? Or did the State Journal, as the task force did, go into neighborhood libraries and community centers, meet with residents of the lowest income neighborhoods of our city to listen to them, to listen to their aspirations for government, to listen to how connected or disconnected they feel from our city government, to hear them describe how impossible it is for them to participate in meaningful ways, even though they want to? Did they listen to a recent council meeting on October 8th when Council Vice President Syed Abbas, near tears, described the level of stress that he lives with, trying to serve on Madison's Common Council as a part-time alder while holding down a full-time job to support his family and spending time with his kids? I ask these questions in the hopes that maybe one or more of the State Journal editorial board members are Rotarians, or maybe some Rotarians know them, and might reconsider their narrow confidence that Madison's government of citizen volunteers is just swell and not in need of close scrutiny and some change. Okay, so now you might be wondering, who is this lunatic, Eileen Harrington? Judge Elke gave a very nice introduction, but let me tell you just a little more about me. I was born in Madison at Madison General Hospital in 1952. I have very deep roots here. In fact, my grandpa, my maternal grandpa, John C. McKenna Sr., and my great uncle, Robert J. Nichols, were among who I understand were like the 4 co-founders of Madison Rotary. So I have deep roots with you, although I'm not a member. After being born here in 1952, I stayed well into my young adult life. I attended Madison's public schools, Queen of Peace Elementary School, graduated from Edgewood High School. My college years were during the Vietnam War, so it actually took me 6 years to get my degree, but I was only in school for 3 years because I was working in the McGovern campaign. I worked for Pat Lucy. He was my early life mentor. My dad, Jack Harrington, was a Madison lawyer, and during his early career, he served in the United States Department of Justice when Franklin Roosevelt was president. I was actually 6 years old in 1958 before I knew that Franklin Delano Roosevelt was no longer the president. That news came as a shock to me, and I was afraid to go home and tell my parents. My dad, while in private practice, served as Madison city attorney for a couple of years. I think Mike May did a little research and found that out. The city attorney's job was part-time back then. My dad also chaired the Police and Fire Commission in the 1950s. My mom, Marcia McKenna Harrington, was a social worker who worked for Dane County Relief and Catholic Social Services. And my mom's dad, John McKenna, was a Madison real estate developer who developed Westmoreland, Sunset Village, Shorewood Hills, and other areas. And my mom's brothers, Jack and Don, developed Orchard Ridge and Meadowood, respectively. I grew up on the near west side at the corner of Hillcrest Drive and Vaughn Court in the house that my parents built when they were married. And I moved to Washington, D.C. in the late 1970s to go to law school, and I stayed there for 34 years. My spouse, Nadia Aswad, and I moved back to Madison at the end of 2012 when I retired from the federal government. And Nadia, who was the chief privacy officer at Fannie Mae, and I decided that we wanted a simpler and saner life. So that's what brought us back to Madison. and we love being here. I've always loved Madison. And since I got back, I've taught public policy at the University of Wisconsin in the fall semester, and I've also taught administrative law at the University of Arizona College of Law, where Nadia and I are fortunate to have a summer or a winter home. During winter, it feels like summer. And as the judge mentioned, I served in the senior executive service of the federal civil service. About 1/4% of career civil servants, non-postal workers, there are 2.1 million members of the federal civil service, and about 1/4% or 5,000 are members of the senior executive service, which is a group of about as I mentioned, about 5,000 folks who manage the federal government's agencies and bureaucracy and provide continuity within the senior ranks of government. Political appointees come and they go, and administrations come and go. The senior executive service provides continuity. We are not the deep state. The judge mentioned that I was honored to receive a Service to America Medal. I was really pleased to watch online recently as my fellow SESer, Dr. Tony Fauci, received the Service to America Medal this year. Tony is the face, and his work is emblematic of the work of the career civil service, a force that has been under unprecedented pressure and outright assault during the Trump administration. And I would urge you to read Michael Lewis's book, The Fifth Risk, Undoing Democracy, for a fuller account of that. So I come from Madison. I have deep roots in Madison, and I have spent my career in public service. And it was in that spirit that I accepted the invitation from former Mayor Soglin and former Council President Marsha Rummel to chair this task force on government structure, which they said, don't worry, it'll only take 6 months. So coming into the work, I hadn't given very much thought to the structure of Madison's government, but after 2 years thinking about it deeply, I've come to see it differently. As the TFOGS report states, there was unanimous agreement among our members on most of the 42 recommendations we made, but there were a few that we were divided on. The recommendation to transition to a full-time council with full-time compensation for alders, and a reduction in the number of council districts from 20 to 10. The full-time council recommendation passed by 1 vote, and a motion to reconsider failed. Its proponents argued that city residents of all socioeconomic groups would be able to serve on the council if they were paid a full-time wage, if they didn't have to serve on the council while also holding down a full-time job and taking care of their families. The recommendation to reduce the size of the council, while not unanimously approved, received more support because some members of the task force who opposed a full-time council supported a smaller council if the members served full-time. Members opposed to a full-time council expressed concern that the council would be made up of professional politicians and pointed to the Wisconsin state legislature as an example of what we do not want the Madison Council to become. I would observe, in my view, that this is not an apt comparison at all. The effect of a full-time legislature is to pull representatives and senators out of their districts while they spend time in Madison. Less engagement with constituents and residents. The effect of a full-time council in Madison would be, I think, to encourage more resident engagement because alders would be doing this job full-time. So I think that this sort of snarky comparison to the Wisconsin legislature is not fair. Supporters of a full-time council noted that most cities have much smaller councils than Madison does. In fact, nationally, the average size of a city council is six. But the size ranges from 5 to 51, but the average is 6. And proponents of a smaller council for Madison also noted that with full-time council members paid a family supporting salary, members, as I mentioned, would be able to engage full-time in engagement with their residents. And we took a look at, for example, Minneapolis and Austin, Texas, where there are full-time councils, and noted that those councils did not seem to have been overtaken by full-time politicians, although some members of our task force said, and I think this bears some thought, why wouldn't we want full-time professional politicians? This is a professional job, and it's a political job. Do we want our city run by a bunch of amateurs, part-time? So let's go to the slides. And now that you know a little bit more about me and what I think, let's take a look at what the task force thought. First of all, what's our current structure? This is a little dense, but Mike May, who's standing right outside, the former city attorney, educated us on Wisconsin law and on the options for structuring city government that the law provides. The city of Madison has chosen the structure of a mayor who is the chief executive and has certain legal responsibilities, and a common council. And you can take a minute to see what those are, or I understand you can rewatch this video of me talking to you endlessly. So you could go back and read this slide because it's a little dense. So the background of the Task Force on Government Structure is that it was created in September 2017 by resolution of the Common Council with the support of then Mayor Soglin. And the task force was charged with investigating whether Madison's government structures ensure that municipal decision makers are representative of and accountable to all residents, or only those with the time, resources, and knowledge of the process. As I've mentioned, we met more than 90 times over 2 years. There were 7 resident members. I made a mistake on this slide. 7 resident members and 4 common council members. We conducted significant public outreach by holding open houses, by using survey instruments, and by hiring 7 community liaisons who live in the neighborhoods that are among the lowest income neighborhoods of the city of Madison in Alder Districts 1, 7, 9, 14, 17, and 20. The key findings that our task force reached are that Madison's government structure, the way that we are structured, makes Madison an extreme outlier among cities in the United States, and particularly cities with populations of 200,000 or more. The city of Madison is an outlier among comparable cities in terms of the number of boards, commissions, and committees that we have that actually shape the public policy recommendations presented to the Common Council for action. We have at least 102 boards, commissions, and committees, and I would note we could never really determine exactly how many boards, commissions, and committees exist because there is no one place to look to find that information. We found that in Madison, our alders represent significantly fewer residents than is the case in many other cities, and that the council is significantly larger. To wit, let me just give you some comparative data. Madison, compared with a number of cities that are in the northern part of the United States and have populations between 200,000 and 600,000, Madison, with our Common Council with 20 members, is the largest council among the cities we looked at. We looked at Milwaukee, Sacramento, Omaha, Minneapolis, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, St. Paul, Toledo, Lincoln, Nebraska, Buffalo, New York, Spokane, and Des Moines. And we found that in those cities, which are in some ways comparable to Madison, the size of the councils of those cities ranged from 7 to 20. That would be Madison. Most of these councils have, cities have councils whose members number in single digits, some in the low double digits. If representation in Madison, that is the number of, if our alders represented the average number of residents represented by alders in these other cities, we would have a council that consists of 5 or 6 members. Our alders represent 12,477 residents, and in most of these other cities, alders represent significantly more residents. There are all sorts of other interesting points of comparison that I would be glad to share, but if you have questions about them, but I'm going to move on with the general observation that Madison truly is an outlier. We found, with respect to our Common Council, that some alders already work full-time as alders because they are either retired, they don't need any additional income, or they have been able to structure their lives to hold a second job that gives them flexibility. These full-time alders spend significantly more time on city work than their colleagues do who hold full-time jobs during the day and can hardly eke out the time to come to Common Council members and often can't make it to meetings of committees and boards and commissions that they're assigned to. And so in its current structure, the alder districts really have disparate levels of representation that is based in great part on the amount of time that the alder has to spend on their job. And I would note anecdotally that my observation is that those alders who are spending full-time have outsized influence in the decision-making processes of the city. Some might disagree, but that's just what I saw. Other key findings. Let me see. I apologize, but I'm a little behind. Oh, thank you. Okay, we've already covered that slide about some alders working full-time, so let's go back. Key findings about boards, commissions, and committees. We found that the boards, commissions, and committees structure lacks diversity, and particularly economic diversity. It also lacks a clarity of purpose, and there is really a stunning lack of accountability. We found that 38% of the 700-some members of the city's boards, commissions, and committees come from districts 4, 6, 11, 13, and 19. And roughly, though, for the most part, those districts are on and near the isthmus. We found that only 12.5% of people serving on boards, commissions, and committees come from districts 1, 7, 8, 9, and 16. Those tend to be districts that are further out. And I would note that Madison developed a lot like many other cities did, with the interests of developers and commercial interests really driving development. My family benefited from that. But one result of that is that people of color and lower income were excluded originally from being able to own land in these parts of the city that are now extremely well represented on boards, commissions, and committees, and were shunted to the fringes of the city, which happened in a lot of cities. Another finding is that there's no organizational chart for boards, commissions, and committees to find out how many there are, to identify them, to find out what their purpose is. We also discovered that there are overlapping and redundant jurisdictions among these boards, commissions, and committees, and that members and chairs frequently do not know how to run meetings. We found that boards, commissions, and committees vary widely with regard to the impact of their recommendations in city decision-making, and that the city's current structure better represents some districts than others, unfairly favors people with time, resources, and knowledge to influence government decisions, and facilitates a system where some BCCs act with considerably more power and resources than others. With respect to the mayor's office, we recommend that Madison retain its mayor form of executive, but we observe that the current span of administrative control that the mayor's office holds may be too wide to ensure adequate supervision of day-to-day operations. There is an absence of routine performance reviews, and there is a complete absence of organizational transparency, and we recommended that the mayor create an organizational chart and post it somewhere so people know how the city's administrative branch is structured. Our key findings on resident engagement. our city has a lack of robust technology options for resident participation. The whole time we were meeting as a task force, we were saying, why can't the city hold meetings that allow residents to participate remotely? The answer was, it just can't be done. We can't do it. We don't have the technology. We just can't do it. Then COVID came. The other problems that we found are that meetings are often held downtown, often at night, that there is rigid adherence to Robert's rules, and that poses real obstacles to resident engagement. Other local governments are ahead of Madison in their use of technology and facilitate resident engagement in a lot of ways. And COVID, as I said, has mentioned that this can be done. Our focus on boards, commissions, and committees and the Common Council shows a significant synergy between recommendations for the boards, commissions, and committees structure and the Common Council, that many of the recommendations flow one from the other. With respect to boards, commissions, and committees, we recommend that the structure be restructured with lead committees overseeing the work of related committees, and that the work of assessing boards, commissions, and committees and reorganizing them into a more manageable and representative and effective structure will demand more time than our city council has. Right now, alders serve on between 2 to 14 committees, and many of them can't make the meetings, and the committees meet and quorum isn't there. This city council can't clean up this problem without full-time effort. We think that the boards, commissions, and committees structure needs increased accountability scaffolded throughout, that there should be goals and deliverables and reports expected from boards, commissions, and committees, and there should be clear metrics that define progress. We think that the Common Council, as we mentioned, should transition to a full-time council, that this is the way to have meaningful resident engagement in the city of Madison, or it's one important step, and that the job can't be done by this part-time band of volunteers who get paid about $13,000 a year. So they're not really volunteers, but they're practically volunteers. The last time that we looked at this in Madison was in 1987, when the council was reduced from 22 to 20 members. We think it's high time to give it another look. And we recommend a switch to 4-year terms, even if these other changes aren't made. We need a full-time council to provide equal representation to the city's residents, rather than representation that's based on the amount of time that their alder has available, to encourage and permit residents who are not time or money rich to run for and serve on the council, to recognize that serving as an alder and doing a good job is a full-time job, and to give the alders the time needed to oversee the city government. In conclusion, we made 42 recommendations. You can see them all on our report, which is found with a great deal of effort on the city's Legistar page. Only 2 of these recommendations, changing from terms from 2 to 4 years and reducing the number of alders from 20 to 10, need to go to the voters for referendum in order to take effect. The reduction in the number of districts would most efficiently occur now in connection with the redistricting that will happen after the census, but there aren't similar timing concerns on the other recommendations. And in conclusion, I would just say these are recommendations that the voters should decide on, not the Common Council. Full-time, part-time, 2-year versus 4-year terms, send it to the voters, Common Council, and let the voters decide. Thanks.
Thank you, Eileen. Great presentation. And obviously, it's very in-depth. When I look at 42 recommendations, that's definitely a lot of work. And I guess you saw when it was projected to be 6 months and it took 2 years that the magnitude of the task was much broader than you initially thought. So I think that's incredible that the work was put into it. The first question that we have here is, in terms of, did you task force evaluate having a city administrator? And that comes from Susan Schmitz.
That is one of the options, that we have a city manager form of government in Madison, which we had for about 2 years in, I'm going to say, 1949, 1950, right in that window. And we had a hard time finding a lot of history on why Madison shifted to the city manager form of government, but it pretty quickly shifted back to the mayor form of government, and we did not see any reason to recommend a change to that.
Okay, great. Next question was Stu Levitan. He talks about the stated goal of professionalizing the council and imposing term limits sounds contradictory, and then that reducing the size of the common council will make it more difficult to elect candidates of color. I mean, you're talking going from 20 to 5 or 6. That's huge, difference. So
yeah, I don't believe that there's evidence of the latter at all. In fact, if you look at the National League of Cities current information on city councils throughout the United States, where in many instances a portion of council members are elected at large, and in virtually all other instances, council members are elected from districts that represent many, many more residents than our alders represent here. If you look at the data from the National Council of Cities, one trend has been that there has been a steady and significant increase all over the country in the election of people of color to city councils. I would look at that and say to Stu, that's the only evidence we've got. What's happened in other cities that have made the changes that we're recommending, and what's happened is more people of color, not fewer, have been elected. And term limits, the thought about term limits, one of our recommendations is that if the council goes to full-time and 4-year terms, that alders be limited to 3 terms. We think that's just enough. That is a built-in protection against someone becoming a career politician on the city council.
great, thank you. Next question from Rich Leffler, who says, increasing the ratio of representation from 1 to 12,400 to 1 to 24,000, almost doubling it, is that really a move in the direction of improved representation? Doesn't sound, you're representing so many more people, so you're not going to have access. It's almost like less availability when you get that many people, so it's counterintuitive.
Well, it's a little bit of an apples and oranges comparison, I would say, because we're talking about full-time alders. So if they're doing the job full-time, they ought to be able to represent more people, number one. Number two, why is Madison such an outlier? Why is it such an outlier? Other cities have small common councils. And, I'm not aware of sort of people marching in the streets there saying that they don't feel represented. The key is, how much time does an alder have to spend on engagement? And right now, what we know, the Madison Common Council, look at the last few years. We have had member after member after member resign during their terms because they just can't do the job of holding down a full-time day job and serving on the council. Most recently, Donna Moreland just resigned a few weeks ago. Sarah Eskridge, who was one of the original members of our task force, resigned because she couldn't do the alder job and do a meaningful full-time job in her career.
Great, thank you. Next question from Jeff Bartell.
Hello, Jeff.
Who staffs these 102 committees and commissions? How much time does that take for city staff, which supports it?
Now, believe this. I know Jeff, and I didn't pay him to ask this question. So here's how it works. City employees staff these boards, commissions, and committees, and no one keeps track of how much time they are spending staffing the boards, commissions, and committees. 2 of our 90-some meetings were with city employees, listening to their thinking about this. And here's what we heard, Jeff and others. We heard that it is not unusual for city employees to spend a lot of time preparing agendas, getting them published to comply with open meetings laws, preparing all the materials, reserving the room, showing up for the board, commission, or committee meeting, only to find that the members aren't there in sufficient number to make quorum. And so not only are the city staff spending a lot of time supporting these boards, commissions, and committees, but they're wasting a lot of time, and no one is keeping track of it. One thing that I think, I was a career civil servant. We reported our time. There are really simple online tools that can be used to track how time is spent. But the city of Madison doesn't use those and doesn't track the time of its employees. I think that if we reduced the number of boards, commissions, and committees, if they were well run, if there was serious oversight, we would save scores of FTEs. And we could either eliminate those positions, divert the money elsewhere, or get those people doing other work that needs to be done.
Okay, final question is from George King, who says, would term limits apply to the mayor?
We didn't think about that. That's a that's a good question. Should they? What do you think?
So with that, I wanted to thank, let's give Eileen a round of applause for an outstanding presentation.
Thank you. It was really an honor to be with you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. So Eileen, thank you very much for the presentation, and thanks for everyone who attended today's meeting. Obviously, we'll have the PowerPoint that Eileen so graciously provided available, and this is pretty amazing for what's going on in city government, and obviously there's lots of opportunity. With that, we are adjourned.